She had an affair while I worked for our family. Then Karma spoke. Welcome to Michael Tells Stories. Here, I share daily infidelity stories about unfaithful wives. Thank you for listening. The first time I noticed the silence. It wasn't the kind that arrives in a room when someone is angry. It was softer than that, almost polite, the silence of a house that has learned to keep its own secrets. And I remember standing in the doorway of our kitchen with my coat still on. The late autumn rain dripping from the hem, and the yellow light over the sink casting Alina's profile into something gentle and familiar. Like the side of a face you could trace in the dark with your fingertips and still find home. She was rinsing strawberries for Mia's lunchbox. One by one, careful as a nurse, and I should have felt grateful. Because I'd been working 12-hour shifts and overtime on weekends. Hauling myself through fluorescent corridors. Swallowing vending machine coffee. Telling myself that if I kept my head down and my hands steady we would be safe. We would be solid. We would be the kind of family that didn't crack under pressure. But the silence was there, hovering between the faucet's hiss and the muted hum of the refrigerator. And when she turned to say hello, her smile reached my mouth before it reached her eyes. "You're home early," she said, and the words were correct. The tone was pleasant, yet something in the air insisted the sentence meant more than it should. Like a door that didn't latch all the way. I kissed her cheek anyway. Tasting lemon dish soap and the faintest trace of perfume that wasn't hers. No. That wasn't fair. Perfume is perfume. Maybe she'd tried a sample at the pharmacy. Maybe it was from a coworker's hug. Maybe it was nothing, but my body remembered it later. The way your skin remembers a bruise even after the color fades. Mia ran in from the living room. Socks sliding on the hardwood, her hair in its crooked ponytail, and launched herself at my legs with the force of a small meteor. "Daddy, you promised you'd read the dragon book," she announced, holding me accountable with the kind of faith only children have. Because to Mia, promises were not flexible, they were anchors. I said, hoisting her up. Feeling the reassuring weight of her. The warmth that always pulled me back from whatever abyss my day had tried to open. After dinner, Elena leaned against the counter, arms crossed loosely, watching us, and her expression held that delicate mix of love and distance that can pass for fatigue if you don't look too closely. "We're having pasta," she said, "your favorite." She didn't say it like it mattered. Not like she used to when we were still learning each other's rhythms and every small preference felt like a map to intimacy. But I nodded and told myself not to be dramatic. Told myself that this is what long marriages look like. Not fireworks. Not constant heat. But the steady work of feeding and cleaning and showing up. The ordinary devotion of keeping the lights on. I was proud of our ordinary. Or at least I had been. If you'd asked me then, I would have said we were tired. Yes. And stretched thin. Yes. But fundamentally good. People like us didn't implode. We were too practical for that. People like us didn't cheat. Because we didn't have the time. Yet time is not the only currency people spend when they're hungry. Dinner was simple. The sauce jarred. The garlic fresh. Elena's hands moving through the motions as if muscle memory could do what the heart didn't feel like doing. We sat at the table under the cheap pendant lamp we'd bought when we first moved in. The one Mia once called the moonlight. and the table was cluttered with homework sheets and crayon stubs and a stack of unopened mail. The kind of chaos that makes a home real. And still I felt like I was sitting across from a stranger who knew exactly how I took my coffee but not why. Elena asked about my day in the way you ask about the weather. And I gave her the safe version. Not the version with the resident who'd cried in the supply closet. Not the version with my supervisor's quiet warning that budgets were tightening. That layoffs were being whispered about in corners. That I should be ready to pick up more shifts if I wanted to keep my spot. I swallowed the fear because I didn't want to put it on the table between the pasta and Mia's spilled milk. And Elena, I assumed, did the same with whatever she carried. Mia talked about a classmate who'd stolen her purple marker. Then corrected herself, saying it wasn't stolen. It was borrowed forever. And Elena laughed. A real laugh that made her shoulders loosen. And for a moment I felt relief. Because there she was. The woman I knew. The woman who used to sit cross-legged on our bed and read poems out loud in a dramatic voice just to make me groan. After dinner, I washed dishes while Elena packed Mia's lunch. And the division of labor looked normal. Almost textbook. But something in my chest stayed tight. Like a hand refusing to unclench. Later, when Mia was asleep and the house finally quiet in the honest way, no hidden edges. Just night, Elena sat on the couch with her laptop open. The glow reflecting in her eyes. I sat at the other end, holding the dragon book in my lap even though I'd already read it. My fingers rubbing the frayed corner of the cover. And I watched her scroll. Her thumb moving in small decisive flicks. Like she was swiping away not just screens but thoughts. Work? I asked. Just emails. She said too quickly. And then, as if remembering she owed me more, she added, the neighborhood association thing. She'd joined the neighborhood association a few months earlier. Something about organizing events. Improving safety, building community, and I'd encouraged it because it sounded healthy. Because she'd been lonely. Because I'd been absent. Because I thought giving her people would help. I didn't know then that loneliness is a clever liar. It can wear the mask of socializing and still be an ache that demands a particular kind of attention. Anything interesting? I asked, trying to sound casual. Trying to reach for her without pulling. Elena's eyes stayed on the screen. Nothing you'd care about, she said, and it stung. Not because she was wrong. Maybe I wouldn't care about committee notes, but because it carried a quiet verdict. As if she'd already decided what parts of her life I no longer qualified to enter. I shifted closer, the cushion dipping. I want to care. I said, I just don't always know what you need. She exhaled, long and controlled. I need you to be home. She said, and it wasn't an accusation. It was worse. It was a fact spoken like a receipt. I'm trying, I said, and the words felt pathetic even as I meant them. Because what does trying look like when the rent is due and the grocery bill climbs and the child needs braces and your workplace hints that you're replaceable? Elena finally looked at me. And in her gaze I saw the woman I'd married and the woman she'd become. Layered like transparent sheets that didn't quite align. You're always trying, she said softly. You're always working. And I'm always waiting. I wanted to tell her that I wasn't working because I loved being away. I was working because I loved her. Because I loved Mia. Because I was terrified of failing them. But those words can sound like excuses when someone's heart is already starving. So I nodded, and I reached for her hand, and she let me hold it. But her fingers stayed limp, like a hand offered out of politeness rather than hunger. That night, in bed, Elena turned away from me, her back a familiar shape that suddenly felt like a wall. And I lay awake listening to the house settle, the pipes clicking, the wind tapping the window. And I told myself this was a season, not a collapse. Told myself love could endure stretches of quiet. Then the phone buzzed. It was Elena's, face down on the nightstand. The vibration muffled but insistent, like a secret knocking. She didn't move. Her breathing stayed even, either asleep or pretending. I stared at the phone as if it were a live thing. I told myself not to be the man who snoops, not to be the man who distrusts the mother of his child, not to be the man whose fear becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. But the buzzing happened again, and again, and on the third time my hand moved before my pride could stop it, sliding the phone toward me just enough to see the screen light up. A name flashed, Cal, and beneath it a message preview. Only a sliver, but enough to pull the blood from my face. Miss you. Are you awake? I froze, my mind scrambling for rational explanations like a man grabbing at floating debris. Cal could be a woman. Cal could be a coworker. Cal could be the neighborhood association guy who handled permits. Cal could be a group chat nickname. Yet the words miss you sat there with the intimacy of a whisper. My thumb hovered over the screen, and I hated myself for wanting to unlock it, for wanting proof, because proof is a kind of point of no return. I didn't unlock it. I didn't wake Elena. I set the phone back down as carefully as if it might explode. But I didn't sleep. The next morning, Elena moved through breakfast with the brisk efficiency of someone who didn't want to linger in any room where feelings might catch up. She kissed Mia's forehead, reminded her to bring her jacket, reminded me to sign the permission slip, and then she was out the door with her tote bag and her hair still damp from the shower. She didn't look guilty. She didn't look elated. She looked composed. And composition, I learned, can be a disguise just as effective as tears. I went to work with miss you lodged in my ribs. In the hospital, everyone had their own drama, patients in pain, families crying, nurses running on fumes, and I kept performing competence while my insides kept circling one question like a vulture. Who is Cal? At lunch, I sat in my car in the parking garage, the concrete walls echoing distant sirens, and I stared at Elena's last text to me. Can you pick up milk? And the normalcy of it felt like a cruel joke. I called her. It rang 3 times before she answered. Hey, she said, voice bright, almost too bright. Everything okay? I asked. And my tone was too controlled. The way you speak when you're trying not to spill. Yeah, why? Just checking in. I said, how's your day? Busy. She replied, neighborhood stuff. With who? I asked. Too quickly. And I heard myself. Heard the suspicion. A pause. What do you mean? She said. And her voice cooled by a single degree. I mean, I tried to recover. Who's involved? Who's helping you? Another pause. Shorter. People. She said. Daniel. What is this? I swallowed. Nothing. I lied. Because if I said Cal, I would open a door I wasn't sure I could close. Just tell Mia I'll be late tonight. You're always late, she said, not angrily, but with that resigned honesty that can feel like a slap. And then she hung up before I could respond. That evening, I came home after 9. The house dark except for the porch light, and the smell of leftover pasta lingering like a memory. Mia was asleep, her dragon book on the floor beside her bed, and Elena was in the living room. Laptop open again, her legs tucked under her, a blanket over her lap. When I stepped in, she closed the laptop so fast it felt like a reflex. "You startled me," she said. "Sorry," I replied. "I didn't think you'd be up." "I couldn't sleep," she said, and her eyes flicked toward the hallway as if checking that Mia was still in her room. I sat down across from her, the space between us wider than the coffee table. "Elena," I began, and the sound of her name in my mouth felt heavy, like a stone. "What? Are you happy?" The question landed poorly, as if I'd thrown it instead of offered it. Elena's mouth tightened. "What kind of question is that?" "It's a real one," I said, and my hands, usually so steady, fidgeted with the zipper of my jacket. I feel like I'm losing you." For a moment, her face softened, and I saw fear there, too, the kind that mirrors your own. And I thought maybe we would finally speak honestly. Maybe we would name the distance and start building a bridge. But then her expression rearranged itself. The softness replaced by irritation. "You're tired," she said. "You're stressed. You're inventing problems because you think if you can fix a problem you can fix everything." "I'm not inventing," I said quietly. "I saw your phone last night." Her eyes widened, then narrowed. "You went through my phone?" "I saw a message pop up," I corrected, and I hated how defensive it sounded. "From someone named Cal." The air in the room changed. Elena didn't deny it. She didn't laugh. She didn't roll her eyes. She simply stared at me as if measuring how much I knew and how much she could still control. "It's nothing," she said finally, and her voice was flat. "Then why hide it?" I asked, and my voice cracked on the last word. "Betraying me." Elena stood, the blanket sliding off her legs. "I'm not doing this," she said. "Not tonight." "When then?" I asked. "When it's convenient for you." She flinched at that, and I saw anger spark. "Don't," she said. "Don't make this about convenience when you're never here." "I'm here now," I said. "I'm begging you to talk to me." Elena's eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. "You want to talk?" she said, a bitter laugh escaping. "Fine. I'm lonely, Daniel. I'm lonely in this house even when you're standing in it. You come home smelling like antiseptic and exhaustion. You eat, you fall asleep, you wake up and you leave. And I'm supposed to be grateful because you're providing. But I didn't marry a paycheck." The words hit me with both fairness and cruelty. Because they were true, and yet they ignored the fact that I had been sacrificing for her. For Mia, for us. "So Cal is what?" I said, forcing it out. "A friend? Someone to fill the hours?" Elena's jaw clenched. "You don't get to interrogate me," she snapped. "You lost that right when you chose work over us." "I chose us," I said, louder now, and the room seemed to echo it. "I chose this family every time I stayed late. Every time I missed dinners. Every time I let my body break down so you wouldn't have to worry about money." Elena's eyes flashed. "And what did you think I was doing here?" She shot back. "Painting my nails and sipping wine? I'm raising our daughter. I'm running this house. I'm making sure Mia has a normal life while you play hero out there." "I'm not playing," I said, my throat burning. "I'm surviving." The word hung between us. Surviving. It sounded like something you say about a war, not a marriage. Alina's shoulders sagged slightly, and for a moment she looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. "Cal is someone," she admitted, and the admission felt like the floor giving way. "Someone who listens," she added quickly, as if that would make it gentler. My chest tightened so hard I thought I might vomit. "So you're having an affair," I said, and even as I said it I wanted it to be wrong. Wanted her to correct me. Wanted her to slap me and say how dare you. But Elena didn't. She looked down at her hands, fingers twisting together, and in that small movement I saw shame. Real shame. Not the performative kind. And it terrified me because shame meant truth. "It's not like that," she whispered, then paused, then tried again, her voice firmer, almost defiant. It started as talking, just talking, and then, she didn't finish. The unfinished sentence said everything. I sat there, my mind splitting into two voices. One screaming, one calculating. The screaming voice wanted to smash something. Wanted to make the world match the pain. The calculating voice immediately thought of Mia. Thought of court schedules and custody arrangements and the mortgage and the way our daughter's face crumples when she senses tension. "How long?" I asked, and I hated the smallness of my voice. Elena swallowed. "A few months," she said, "since the summer block party." The block party. I remembered it, vaguely, because I'd come home late from a shift and stopped by. Still in scrubs, sweaty and apologetic, and Elena had introduced me to neighbors while Mia ran around with sparklers. I remembered a tall man with a confident smile offering me a beer I didn't have time to drink. A man whose handshake was warm and firm. "Cal," I said, and it wasn't a question. It was a sick recognition. Elena's eyes flicked up, then away. "His name is Calvin," she said softly, as if the full name would humanize him. As if that would make betrayal more digestible. I stood abruptly, the couch cushions springing back, and the sudden movement made Elena flinch. "Where is he?" I demanded, and the anger finally broke through the shock. Hot and trembling. "Don't," Elena said, standing too, palms out as if calming an animal. "Don't do that, please." "Do what?" I snapped. "Be a husband who's been humiliated in his own house." Elena's face tightened, and then, to my shock, she looked angry too. "You don't get to be the only one hurt," she said, and the selfishness of the sentence made my vision blur with rage. "I'm not the only one who broke something," she continued, voice rising. "You broke us first, Daniel, piece by piece. Every time you promised you'd be home and then you weren't. Every time you looked through me like I was part of the furniture. Every time you treated my loneliness like a minor inconvenience." I stared at her, the woman who had held my face in her hands when my father died. The woman who had whispered "you're safe now" when we were 25 and broke. And I realized with a sharp, cold clarity that she truly believed her betrayal had a context that excused it. That she believed my absence had written her permission slip. "So you punished me," I said, voice low. "You punished our daughter. You punished this family." Elena's eyes filled. "Finally. I didn't mean for it to happen," she said, and now she sounded like someone pleading with herself. It felt like breathing again. That sentence, more than anything, cut me, because it meant that with him she felt alive, and with me she felt suffocated. And no amount of overtime pay could compete with the sensation of breathing. I backed away, my hands shaking, and I looked toward the hallway where Mia slept, and I felt the weight of responsibility press down harder than my anger. "We can't do this here," I said, and the steadiness of my tone surprised me. "Not with Mia in the house." Elena wiped her cheek with the back of her hand, nodding, and in that moment she looked both guilty and stubborn, like someone who knows they've done wrong but refuses to be fully condemned. "What do you want?" she asked, voice small. I stared at her, and the truth rose like bile. I wanted my old life back. The version where we were a team, where her laughter came easy and her phone didn't buzz with someone else's longing, where my sacrifices meant something. But I couldn't unlearn what I'd learned. I couldn't unknow Cal. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I need time." Elena nodded again, too quickly, as if relieved by the postponement. "Okay," she whispered. "Time." I went upstairs and slept in the guest room, a room we mostly used for storage. The bed too firm and the air smelling faintly of cardboard. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening for Elena's movements, and when I heard the soft click of her bedroom door I imagined her texting him. Telling him it happened, telling him I knew, and the thought made my stomach twist. At 2 in the morning, I heard her muffled sob, a sound she probably thought I couldn't hear through the walls. And it startled me, because it meant she was not a villain in a melodrama. She was a person who had made a terrible choice and now sat in the rubble with me. That didn't fix anything. It just made the pain more complicated. The next days moved like a slow funeral. We acted normal for Mia, because that is what parents do. We performed cheerfulness at breakfast. We smiled at her stories. We clapped when she showed us a drawing of our family holding hands. And the cruelty of that drawing nearly broke me because she had drawn Elena and me close together. Our shoulders touching, our mouths curved into simple cartoon smiles. And I wondered if children draw what they see or what they need. And whether Mia was already sensing the fracture. Elena and I spoke only in logistics, pickup times, grocery lists, Mia's dentist appointment. At night, when Mia slept, we avoided each other's eyes, as if eye contact might ignite something we couldn't contain. I kept working, because work was the only place my body remembered how to function. But now the hospital's dramas felt distant. Like someone else's life. Every time my phone vibrated, my heart jumped, as if it might be Elena, as if she might say she'd ended it, as if she might say she was sorry in a way that meant something, as if she might say I choose us. But mostly she said, "Can you grab Mia's asthma refill? Can you pick up milk?" Normal sentences over a shattered foundation. On Friday, I came home earlier than usual, determined to talk, determined to stop living like a ghost in my own house. The driveway was empty except for Elena's car. Inside, the house was quiet, too quiet for late afternoon when Mia should have been building something loud in the living room. "Elena?" I called. No answer. I walked through the kitchen, past the lunchbox on the counter, past the half-folded laundry, and then I heard it, a low murmur from upstairs. A voice not mine, a male voice, warm and intimate, like it belonged there. My chest tightened, and my feet moved before my brain could decide. I climbed the stairs quietly, each step a betrayal of my own dignity. And the murmur grew clearer, punctuated by Alina's soft laugh. At the top, I saw Mia's door cracked open. Her room dark, empty. Panic flared. Then I remembered. It was playdate day. Mia was likely at her friend's house down the street. That should have calmed me. It didn't. The voices came from our bedroom. Our bedroom. The place where we'd made a child. Where we'd argued softly under blankets. Where Elena once traced the scar on my shoulder like it was a story she wanted to keep. The door was closed. I stood in the hallway, my hand hovering near the knob, my body buzzing with adrenaline and disbelief. I didn't want to see. I also couldn't not see. I turned the knob and pushed the door open. Elena was sitting on the edge of the bed, fully dressed, her hair loose, her cheeks flushed, and standing beside the dresser was Calvin. Tall, handsome in that effortless way that makes you want to hate him even before he opens his mouth. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, his posture relaxed, like a man comfortable in someone else's space. When the door opened, they both looked up, and Alina's face drained of color so fast it was almost impressive. Calvin's expression shifted only slightly, the confident smile faltering at the corners. "Daniel," Elena whispered, and the sound of my name in her mouth felt foreign, like she was saying it for someone else. Calvin straightened, lifting his hands a little as if to show innocence. "Hey," he said, and the casualness of that greeting made something in me go dangerously calm. "You shouldn't be here," Elena said, not to him, to me, as if I were the intruder. I stared at them, at the bedspread smoothed too neatly, at Alina's phone on the nightstand, screen lit with some message thread, at Calvin's jacket draped over my chair, and I felt a strange detachment settle over me, like my mind had stepped back to protect itself. "Where's Mia?" I asked, and my voice was steady, almost polite. Elena blinked rapidly, as if my question didn't compute. "She's at Norris," she said quickly. "Playdate." I nodded. "So you planned this," I said, and now my calm turned sharp. "You waited until our daughter was out of the house." Elena stood abruptly. "Daniel, please," she said, reaching for me, but I stepped back. Calvin cleared his throat. "Look, man," he began, and I swung my gaze to him so fast he stopped. "Don't," I said, and the word held more threat than volume. Calvin's jaw tightened. "Defensive. I'm not trying to disrespect you," he said, and the hypocrisy of it nearly made me laugh. "You're in my bedroom," I replied, and my voice finally trembled. "You're wearing your shoes on my carpet and telling me you're not trying to disrespect me." Elena's eyes filled again. "It's not what you think," she said, the oldest lie in the book, and hearing it from her made my stomach turn. "It's exactly what I think," I said, "and worse, because I thought we at least had the decency to keep this away from Mia." Elena shook her head frantically. "Mia doesn't know," she insisted. "She doesn't. She will," I said, and my voice cracked now, the pain breaking through. "Kids always know something. They feel it in their bones." Calvin shifted, glancing toward the door as if calculating his exit. "Maybe I should go," he said. Elena looked at him, panic on her face, and the way she looked at him, like he was a lifeline, was the final twist of the knife. Yes, I said to Calvin, and my voice was cold. You should. Calvin hesitated, then grabbed his jacket from my chair, brushing past Elena, and as he walked toward me he muttered, I didn't want it to get messy. I stared at him, and for a moment I imagined my fist meeting his smug mouth. Imagined the satisfying violence of it, the simple math of pain for pain. But then I saw Mia's drawing in my mind. The cartoon smiles, the little hands holding on. And I held myself still. It's already messy, I said quietly, and Calvin left, the front door clicking shut downstairs like a verdict. Elena stood in our bedroom, trembling, and the room smelled faintly of her shampoo and something else, his cologne. Maybe, or the metallic scent of adrenaline, and I felt suddenly exhausted. Bone deep. Why? I whispered, and the word carried everything. Why him? Why here? Why now? Why destroy what we built? Elena's shoulders shook. I don't know how to stop, she admitted, and the honesty of that sentence terrified me more than any denial. Because it meant this wasn't a mistake that could be apologized away. It was an addiction, a hunger, a fracture in her that she was feeding even as it consumed her. I backed away toward the door, my eyes stinging. Then I have to, I said, and I didn't know exactly what I meant until the words were out. Elena's head snapped up. What does that mean? She demanded, fear sharpening her tone. It means I can't keep pretending. I said, it means something changes now. Elena shook her head, tears spilling. Don't take Mia, she said immediately, the primal panic of motherhood overriding everything else. Please, don't punish me by taking her. The irony nearly made me choke. I'm not punishing you, I said, though my voice was raw. I'm protecting her. I'm protecting myself. And maybe, if you have any part of you left that cares about what kind of mother you are, you'll protect her too. Elena sank onto the bed, hands covering her face, and her sobs sounded like something tearing. I left the room and walked downstairs, my legs heavy, and in the living room the afternoon sun slanted through the blinds, striping the couch in warm bands. The same couch where we'd once cuddled with newborn Mia between us. Terrified and ecstatic, swearing we'd always choose each other. The mail stack sat untouched. A half-built Lego house stood on the coffee table. Ordinary life waiting politely while our marriage burned behind closed doors. I picked up my phone and called Nora's mother, forcing my voice to stay calm as I said I'd be picking Mia up early. And when I hung up I stood in the kitchen and stared at the sink. At the strawberries Elena had rinsed days ago. Now gone. Consumed. Like moments you can't get back. Somewhere upstairs, Elena cried, and I felt my heart split into two aching parts. One still loving her. One finally accepting that love alone doesn't keep a family safe. And in the quiet after the storm, I heard a new sound inside myself. Not hope yet, but something like resolve. The first small step toward whatever came next. Because karma, I would learn, doesn't always arrive with thunder. Sometimes it arrives as a door closing. As a decision made in silence. As the moment you stop sacrificing your dignity to keep someone else comfortable. The next hour moved in a strange, sharpened clarity, like the world had switched to a high-definition setting while my mind floated a few inches behind my body. Watching me do the things a father must do when his heart is breaking. I grabbed Mia's backpack from the hook by the door. Checked the fridge out of habit. Saw milk missing and almost laughed at the absurdity of still noticing groceries when the bigger emptiness was upstairs. Then I took my keys and stepped out into the damp afternoon. The air smelling of wet leaves and chimney smoke. And I drove the 3 blocks to Nora's house with both hands locked on the wheel as if the steering column were the only stable thing left in my life. Nora's mother opened the door with a polite smile that faltered when she saw my face. Because adults can read each other's weather even when we pretend we can't. "Hi, Daniel," she said carefully. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I lied. The word automatic. Work shifted. "I need to get Mia." "Of course," she replied, already stepping aside. Inside, the house was bright and warm. The scent of cookies and dog fur. Kids' laughter spilling from the living room. And Mia ran toward me with a plastic crown sliding down her forehead. Her cheeks rosy. Her eyes wide with the kind of pure joy that makes you want to protect it with your life. "Daddy, we built a castle and Nora said I can be the Dragon Queen," she announced. Breathless, I crouched and hugged her, inhaling her shampoo, that sweet artificial strawberry smell that always made me think of how quickly childhood passes. And I held her a second too long until she wiggled, laughing, and asked, "Are you sad? Because children are brutal in their perception? They don't need evidence. They just need vibration." "I'm okay," I said softly. "Just tired." "You always tired," she said matter-of-factly. Then brightened. "Can we get hot chocolate?" I nodded, my throat tight. "Yes, we can." I thanked Nora's mother, gave her a smile that felt like a mask slipping, and walked Mia out to the car, her small hand in mine, her chatter filling the space where my thoughts wanted to scream. On the drive back she told me every detail of the playdate. The castle, the rules of being Dragon Queen, the injustice of Nora's little brother trying to be a knight, and I responded at the right moments. But my mind kept returning to the image of Calvin's jacket on my chair. The way Elena had looked at him like he mattered, and the way she had told me she didn't know how to stop. Back at the house, Mia ran inside and kicked off her shoes, calling, "Mom, I'm home." And the sound of her voice echoing up the stairs made my stomach turn with dread. Because I didn't know what Elena would do when she heard her. Didn't know if she'd pull herself together or shatter in front of our child. I followed Mia into the kitchen, turned on the kettle, kept my hands busy because stillness felt dangerous. "Mom," Mia called again, louder. The floor above creaked. Then Elena appeared at the top of the stairs. Her face blotchy, eyes swollen, hair messy, and for one terrifying second she looked like a stranger. A woman who'd been caught in a fire. Mia froze, crown slipping. "Mommy?" she said, voice small. Elena's expression rearranged itself fast, like a performer snapping into character. And she plastered on a smile that didn't fit. "Hi, baby," she said, coming down the steps, arms opening. Mia ran into them, and Elena hugged her so tightly Mia squeaked. "You're squishing me." Mia giggled, and the innocence of the giggle nearly cracked my ribs. Elena's eyes flicked to mine over Mia's shoulder. And in that look I saw a plea and a warning and a kind of desperation that said, "Don't, not in front of her." I nodded once. Not agreement, just acknowledgement of the boundary. I poured hot water into mugs, The kettles hiss loud in the tense quiet. Hot chocolate time, I said, forcing cheer into my voice. Dragon queens require fuel. Mia brightened immediately, and Elena busied herself with marshmallows, her hands trembling slightly as she opened the bag. The three of us stood in the kitchen, shoulder to shoulder in the most ordinary domestic tableau. And yet I felt like we were actors in a play whose audience was one small girl who believed the script still made sense. That night, after Mia went to bed, Elena and I met in the living room like two people called to a meeting they didn't want to attend. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, the coffee table between us like a moat, the blinds casting thin shadows across the carpet. Elena spoke first, her voice hoarse from crying. "I shouldn't have brought him here," she said. "I know." I stared at my hands, at the faint cracks in my knuckles from too much washing and winter dryness. "But you did, and you would have," I added, glancing up, "if I hadn't come home." Elena flinched, then nodded. Yes. Her honesty was a blade. "So what now?" she asked, and her eyes tried to hold mine, tried to anchor to my face the way they used to when we planned vacations and talked about baby names. "Now," I said slowly, choosing each word like a stone placed carefully on unstable ground. "You end it, completely. No messages, no meetings, no closure. You end it." Elena swallowed, and for a moment I saw the addiction she'd admitted to. The craving, the fear of withdrawal. "It's not that simple," she whispered. "It is," I said, my voice harder than I expected. "You made it complicated, but ending it is simple. It's just painful." Elena's eyes filled again. "And if I do?" she asked. "What happens to us?" The question landed like a small bomb, because it implied she thought there might still be an us, still intact enough to salvage. I exhaled through my nose, the air shaking. "I don't know," I said. "I'm not promising anything. I'm not negotiating my dignity. You don't get to keep me as a safety net while you taste freedom." Elena's face tightened, guilt and anger warring. "So you're done," she said, voice sharp. "You're punishing me." I shook my head. "I'm protecting myself." The words tasted unfamiliar, because for years my default setting had been to protect the family by protecting her. By absorbing stress like a sponge. By working myself raw and calling it love. "I can't live in a house where I'm humiliated," I continued, and my voice softened, not because I felt gentle, but because I felt tired. "And I can't raise Mia in a home where her mother is disappearing into someone else." Elena pressed her fingers to her temple as if trying to hold her skull together. "You weren't here," she whispered again, clinging to the one narrative that made her less monstrous. "You left me." "I left for work," I said, and the simplicity of the statement made it almost laughable. "I didn't leave to chase someone who made me feel alive. I left to pay for this house, for her school, for the life you wanted. And yes, I know that doesn't feed a marriage. I know I should have been more present. But you didn't come to me. You didn't say, 'Daniel, I'm drowning.' You went to him." Elena's shoulders sagged. "I tried," she said quietly. "I tried to talk. You'd nod and say you're sorry and then you'd work another shift." "Because we needed it," I said, and then I stopped, because even as I said it, I felt the truth behind it. We needed money. Yes. But we also needed choices. And I had chosen work as my language of love because it was the only language I felt competent in. The only one that didn't require vulnerability. The only one that made me feel like I was doing something tangible. I realized in that moment that my absence hadn't caused her affair. But it had created a space where loneliness could grow teeth. Elena wiped her cheeks with trembling hands. I can end it, she said, voice small. I can. I will. Tonight, I said, and my eyes didn't blink. Right now. Elena inhaled sharply, panic flaring. Daniel, right now, I repeated, and the firmness in my voice surprised even me. Because if you leave this room and text him later, it'll be your secret again. And I'm done living in secrets. Elena stared at me for a long moment. And then she nodded, defeated. She reached for her phone on the side table, her fingers fumbling as if the device were suddenly too heavy. She opened the message thread, and the glow lit her face with a cruel intimacy. I watched, chest tight, as she typed, her thumbs moving slowly, tears dropping onto the screen. She hesitated once, and in that hesitation I saw her desire to soften it, to preserve him, to leave a door cracked. No, I said quietly, and she looked up, startled. Be clear, I added. If you're ending it, end it. Elena swallowed hard and typed again. I didn't ask to read it. I didn't need the words. I needed the act, the severing. She hit send, and then she stared at the screen as if waiting for lightning. A reply came almost instantly. The phone buzzing in her hand. Elena's breath caught. I watched her eyes flick across the message. And then her face crumpled. He's angry, she whispered, voice breaking. He says I'm overreacting. He says you're controlling me. He says I. Stop. I said, you don't owe me his commentary. Elena nodded, wiping her face. And then she did something that surprised me. She blocked the number. Her thumb pressing the option like a woman slamming a door on her own addiction. She set the phone down on the table like it was a weapon she'd disarmed. There, she whispered. It's done. The room held its breath. I didn't feel relief. I felt emptier. Because ending it didn't rewind time. Didn't erase what had happened in our bed. Didn't stitch trust back together. It simply confirmed that we were now standing in the wreckage with no more illusions to cushion the fall. I'm going to stay in the guest room, I said. Elena's eyes widened, fear sharpening. For how long? Until I can breathe, I replied, and I stood, my knees stiff, my body older than its years. Elena rose too, reaching out as if to grab my sleeve. But she stopped herself, her hand hovering in the air like a broken gesture. Daniel, she whispered, and her voice held a familiar ache. The one that used to pull me toward her. I'm sorry. I looked at her, really looked, and saw the woman who had once been my best friend. The woman whose laugh used to be my favorite sound. And I also saw the woman who had chosen to risk everything for the sensation of breathing. I believe you, I said quietly, but being sorry isn't the same as being safe. I walked upstairs and closed the guest room door behind me. And in the dark I sat on the edge of the bed with my head in my hands. The silence roaring, and I realized I had crossed a line inside myself. I was no longer begging to be loved. I was choosing to be respected, even if it meant living with pain. That weekend, we moved through the house like polite strangers. Elena cooked breakfast. I made coffee. Mia played on the floor with her dolls, narrating dramatic storylines that involved dragons and queens and sudden betrayals that made my skin crawl. Because children absorb the emotional climate the way plants absorb light. Elena tried to smile, tried to be normal, but her eyes looked haunted, as if she were listening for Calvin's voice in every quiet moment. On Sunday, she asked if we could talk. We sat at the kitchen table while Mia watched cartoons in the living room. The sound of animated laughter filtering in. Cruelly cheerful. Elena clasped her hands around a mug she wasn't drinking. "I'll do counseling," she said. "Individual, couples, whatever. I'll do anything." I studied her, the plea in her eyes. And I felt something complicated, a flicker of compassion. And beneath it a hard knot of self-preservation. "You should do individual counseling for you," I said, not as a bargain. Elena nodded quickly. "I will. And I'm going to see someone too," I added, and the admission felt strange. Because I had always been the one who handled things by muscle and grit. Not by talking. But I knew I couldn't carry this alone without turning it into bitterness. Elena's shoulders relaxed slightly, as if my willingness to seek help signaled that I wasn't immediately abandoning her. "So, you're not leaving," she said carefully. I exhaled. "I didn't say that," I replied. "I'm not making decisions while I'm bleeding." Elena's eyes filled again, but she nodded, swallowing her feelings. "Okay," she whispered. "What do we do in the meantime?" "We focus on Mia," I said. "We keep her life stable. We don't fight in front of her. We don't pull her into adult pain." Elena nodded, and for a moment we looked like partners again. Not romantic partners, but co-parents. Two people who shared a child and a responsibility bigger than their own wounded pride. Then the doorbell rang. The sound was sharp, unexpected, slicing through the fragile calm. Elena flinched, and my stomach tightened immediately. Because trauma trains you fast. Elena stood, eyes wide. "Who would?" she began. Then stopped. Because the bell rang again. Longer this time. Impatient. I rose too, my body moving on instinct, and walked to the front door. Through the frosted glass, I saw a tall silhouette. I didn't need to guess. I opened the door and there he was. Calvin. Standing on my porch like he had every right to occupy space in my life. His jaw set, his eyes hard, his hands shoved into the pockets of an expensive coat. Behind him, the street was gray and wet, the branches bare, the neighborhood quiet. "We need to talk," he said. Not hello, not apology, just demand. I felt a cold calm settle over me again. The same dangerous calm from Friday. "No," I said simply. Calvin's eyebrows rose, incredulous. Elena blocked me. He snapped, stepping forward slightly, and I held my ground, my body filling the doorway. "That's the point," I replied. She ended it. Calvin laughed, sharp and humorless. "You think you can just stop," I said, and my voice was quiet but firm. "You don't get to argue with me about what my wife chooses." The word wife felt strange on my tongue now. Both claim and weight. Calvin's gaze flicked past my shoulder toward the hallway, toward the kitchen, as if searching for her. "Elena," he called loudly, and my blood turned hot. I stepped out onto the porch and closed the door behind me, blocking the sound. Blocking him from my home. Rain misted my face. "Don't," I said, and my voice sharpened. My daughter is inside. Calvin's mouth tightened, irritation flaring. Your daughter? He repeated, scoffing. And then he leaned closer, voice dropping. She told me you're never here. She told me you check out. She told me she feels alone. The cruelty of him weaponizing her loneliness made my hands curl into fists at my sides. She made choices, I said tightly. Now you leave. Calvin's eyes flashed. You think you're some noble martyr. He hissed, working for the family while she suffocated. You don't get to act surprised. You built the cage. I stared at him, and for a moment I saw the type of man he was. Not just a lover in a scandal, but a predator who fed on weakness, who reframed betrayal as liberation, who believed his desire was justification enough. You're not a savior, I said quietly. You're an opportunist. Calvin's jaw clenched. Tell her to come out, he said, voice tightening. You deserve nothing. I cut in, the words like ice. You were never part of this family. You were a secret, and secrets don't get rights. Calvin took a breath as if to speak again. But before he could, the door behind me opened. Elena stepped onto the porch, her face pale, eyes wide with panic. Calvin, she whispered, and hearing his name from her mouth made my stomach twist. You shouldn't be here. Calvin's expression softened instantly, charm sliding back onto his features like a practiced mask. I just wanted to make sure you're okay, he said, voice warm. A complete performance. You blocked me. I worried. Elena's eyes flicked to me, then back to him, and I saw her battling herself. The old craving flaring, the need for attention, for validation, for someone to tell her she wasn't a monster. I'm not okay, she said, voice trembling. But you can't fix that. You need to leave. Calvin's smile faltered. Elena. No, she said, and the firmness in her voice surprised me. She stepped closer to the edge of the porch, rain dotting her hair, her shoulders squaring as if she were finally standing inside her own body again. You need to stop. You need to respect this. You need to respect my family. Calvin's eyes hardened. Your family, he repeated, bitter, and then he glanced at me with open contempt. This is what you choose. A man who treats you like an afterthought. Elena's lips trembled, and for a second I feared she would fold under the insult. Because shame makes people desperate. But then she lifted her chin. Yes, she said quietly. Because he is Mia's father. Because he showed up in 1,000 ways I stopped noticing. And because even if our marriage is broken, I'm not breaking my child. The words hit me in the chest. Not as absolution, but as something like truth returning to the room. Calvin's face contorted, anger flashing. So that's it, he said, voice rising. You're going to pretend this never happened and crawl back into your little life? Elena's eyes filled, but she didn't look away. I'm not pretending, she said. I'm owning what I did. And I'm ending it. Calvin took a step closer. And instinctively I moved between them. My body protective without thinking. Calvin noticed, his gaze narrowing. This is you. He spat at me, always stepping in, always controlling the narrative. I held his eyes. Leave, I said, each letter heavy. Calvin's breathing was quick, his jaw tight, and for a moment I thought he might do something reckless. Might shove me, might try to force the porch into a scene. But then a curtain twitched across the street. A neighbor watching. And Calvin's pride recalculated. He stepped back, lips curling. "Fine," he said, voice low. "But don't think this ends clean. People talk. Neighborhoods talk." Elena flinched, fear flashing at the threat of public exposure. At the idea of being judged by the same women she'd chatted with at the block party. Calvin turned and walked down the steps, rain darkening his shoulders, and as he reached his car he looked back once, his eyes sharp, and then he drove away. Elena sagged slightly, her composure cracking, and she pressed a hand to her mouth as if holding in a sob. I opened the door and guided her back inside, closing it firmly, locking it with a twist that felt symbolic. In the hallway, Mia's cartoon laughter floated toward us. Oblivious, Elena leaned against the wall, shaking. "He threatened me," she whispered. "He'll tell people. He'll let him," I said, and the steadiness in my voice surprised her. "If people talk, they talk. We're not living our lives for the neighborhood association." Elena stared at me, eyes wide. "You don't understand," she said, voice breaking. "They'll hate me. They'll judge Mia. She'll hear. Then we handle it," I replied, and my voice softened. "We protect her, but we don't let fear keep you tied to him." Elena slid down the wall to sit on the floor, hands shaking. "I feel like I'm dying," she whispered, and the sentence was raw. Not dramatic, just honest withdrawal from the illusion she'd been inhaling for months. I crouched across from her, my knees creaking, and for a moment I wanted to touch her, to comfort her, because old habits don't disappear overnight. But I held back, because comfort can blur boundaries. And I needed boundaries like I needed air. "You're not dying," I said quietly. "You're facing the consequences." Elena sobbed silently, shoulders shaking, and I felt a strange mix of anger and pity. Because karma was already speaking. Not through grand catastrophe, but through exposure. Through discomfort, through the loss of a fantasy that had made her feel alive. And I realized that for the first time, she couldn't hide behind the story that she was a lonely victim. Now she had to look at the damage she'd done. Not just to me, but to herself. Because being the woman who betrays her own values is its own kind of punishment. That evening, after Mia went to bed, Elena sat at the table with a notebook, writing down everything she remembered about Calvin. Every message, every interaction, because I insisted we needed to be prepared if he tried to smear her. If he tried to manipulate the neighborhood. If he tried to contact Mia's school. Elena wrote with shaking hands. Her face set, and I watched her and felt something shift. She was no longer floating in romance. She was grounded in reality. And reality is where redemption begins. If it can begin at all. "Did he ever come near Mia?" I asked, voice tight. Elena's head snapped up, horrified. "No," she said quickly. "Never. He never met her. He saw her at the block party. But, no. I would never." The intensity of her denial made me believe her. And the relief that flooded me was so sharp it made me dizzy. "Good," I said, my voice rough. Because if he had, I stopped. Because I didn't want to voice the darkness that rose in me at that thought. Elena nodded, tears sliding again. "I know," she whispered. "I know." The next week, karma spoke louder. It started small, like all disasters do, with a single phone call. Elena answered her phone one afternoon while Mia was coloring at the table. And I heard Elena's voice change. Heard the brittle politeness, the forced calm. Yes, she said. I understand. Yes. I'll come in. She hung up and stared at the wall. Face drained. What? I asked, my stomach dropping. Elena swallowed hard. It's the community center, she whispered. They said there's been a complaint. They want to discuss my role in the neighborhood association. I felt my jaw tighten. Calvin, I said. Elena nodded, eyes wide with fear. He knows people. Her voice broke. He's doing it. I exhaled slowly, rage simmering. Okay, I said, and the firmness in my voice steadied both of us. We don't panic. You go in. You tell the truth you need to tell. And nothing more. You don't grovel. You don't beg. You keep your dignity. Elena stared at me as if she didn't recognize me. As if she expected me to scream or collapse. And I realized that in her mind I had been the man who absorbed pain quietly. Not the man who strategized. Who protected. Who stood firm. Why are you helping me? She whispered. The question carried shame, disbelief, and a flicker of hope. I looked at her, and the answer was complicated. I was helping because I refused to let Calvin control our lives. I was helping because Mia deserved stability. I was helping because even when love is wounded, decency can remain. Because your consequences don't include letting a predator destroy you. I said, and because whatever happens between you and me, you are still Mia's mother. Elena's eyes filled again, but this time her tears looked different, less self-pity, more gratitude, more humility. The day Elena went to the community center meeting, I took the afternoon off. Something I almost never did, and I sat in the parking lot with my hands on the steering wheel while she walked inside. Her shoulders squared, her face pale but determined. She didn't ask me to come in with her, and I didn't offer, because part of her rebuilding had to involve standing on her own. I watched through the glass as she spoke to a woman behind a desk. Then disappeared down a hallway. Mia was at school, oblivious, learning spelling words while her mother's reputation trembled on a thread. I sat there in the car and felt the strange reversal. For years, I had been the one bracing against outside threats, bills, layoffs, illness. While Elena kept the home safe, now Elena's choices had brought an outside threat into our lives. And I was bracing again. But this time the enemy had a name, a smug smile, and a willingness to weaponize gossip. An hour later Elena came back out, her face tight, her eyes glassy. She got into the car and stared forward, hands gripping her purse like a life raft. What happened? I asked gently. Elena swallowed. They said someone reported inappropriate conduct, she whispered. Voice cracking. They didn't say details, but I could tell they wanted me to resign. My chest tightened. Did you? I asked. Elena shook her head slowly. No, she said, and her voice surprised me with its steadiness. I told them I'm going through a private family crisis. I told them I won't discuss rumors. I told them if they want me gone, they can put it in writing. She glanced at me, eyes shining, and I saw something in her that I hadn't seen in months. Spine. Good, I said, and I meant it. That's exactly right. Elena exhaled, a shaky breath that sounded like relief and grief tangled. They looked at me like I was dirty. She whispered, like they could smell it. I reached out then, not to comfort her as a husband, but as a human. and I placed my hand lightly on her forearm. A brief touch. Grounded. Not romantic. You made a mistake, I said quietly. A huge one. But you're not dirty. Don't let them reduce you. Elena's eyes brimmed, and she nodded, holding herself together. That night, after Mia went to sleep, Elena received an email. I saw her open her laptop at the kitchen table. Saw her face change as she read. Saw her hand fly to her mouth. What? I asked, my stomach sinking again. Elena turned the screen toward me, and the words sat there in cold professional font. A formal notice from the community center board, requesting her resignation from the neighborhood association leadership due to conduct inconsistent with community values. Effective immediately. No evidence. No details. Just a verdict shaped by whispers. Elena's breath hitched. He did this, she whispered, and then, as if the full weight finally landed, she broke, sobbing hard, shoulders shaking, face collapsing into her hands. I stood behind her, my hands hovering. Then I stepped back, because I needed to keep my boundaries. But the sound of her crying filled the kitchen like a storm. Upstairs, Mia slept, unaware that her mother's social world was burning. Karma had spoken, yes, but it had a cruel accent. Because karma doesn't always punish only the guilty. It threatens to splash everyone nearby. Elena lifted her face, eyes red, and looked at me with something like terror. I ruined everything, she whispered. I ruined us. I ruined her. I ruined. Stop, I said, firm but not unkind. You ruined your image, maybe our marriage, but you haven't ruined Mia. Not if we handle this like adults. Elena's mouth trembled. How? She whispered. By not letting this turn you into someone smaller. I said, by not letting shame make you desperate. Elena stared at me, and I saw the moment she understood what desperation had done to her. How it had led her to Calvin. How it had made her vulnerable to manipulation. She nodded slowly, wiping her cheeks. Okay, she whispered. Okay. The next day, the neighborhood spoke. It started with small changes. A woman who used to wave now looked away. A man who'd once chatted about lawn care suddenly found his phone fascinating. Elena noticed. Of course she did. Because she had been part of that social web. And now she was being edged out like a stain. She tried to hold her head high when she walked Mia to school. But her shoulders were tight. Her smile strained. One afternoon, Mia came home quiet, her chatter absent. She put her backpack down slowly and sat at the kitchen table without asking for a snack. Which was how I knew something was wrong. Hey, Dragon Queen, I said softly, kneeling beside her. What's up? Mia's lower lip trembled. Nora said her mom said you and mommy are fighting. She whispered, eyes wide, and my heart dropped. And Nora said her mom said mommy is bad. The word bad landed like a slap. Elena, who had been rinsing dishes at the sink, froze, the plate in her hands trembling. I felt anger surge, not at Elena this time, but at the world's casual cruelty toward a child. I looked at Mia, and I chose my words carefully. Because this was one of those moments that shapes a child's internal map of love and safety. Listen to me, I said gently, meeting her eyes. Mommy is not bad. Mommy made a mistake. Adults make mistakes sometimes. Big ones. But mistakes don't decide who you are forever. Mia frowned, confusion wrinkling her forehead. What mistake? She whispered. Elena turned slowly from the sink. Her face pale, eyes shimmering with tears she was trying not to spill in front of our child. The moment had arrived sooner than we wanted. And I realized then that the next choice we made, how we told the truth, how we protected Mia, how Elena held her dignity, would be the real beginning of either our collapse or our healing. That's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, please leave a comment with your thoughts, like the video, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you.